I stepped up onto the train and detected that everything smelled like coffee and tea. From the car, I did not hear what I expected. Instead, I heard voices that could not agree. "What are you arguing about?" I wanted to ask, but I was too busy looking at the man with the flask. He stood there refusing to take a seat, while the young lady was finishing what she had phrased. Suddenly he snarled, "All women cheat," which shocked me because I had been raised to see all people as completely and absolutely equal. But I realized that his retort was just a prequel. The religious man in the front just snorted, but the lady was ready for a fight. "No, I think you've got it all distorted." To which the man lit a cigar and said, "All right." The religious man fidgeted with his pocket cross and said, "God said, man's the boss." He quoted some strange verse from an obscure book, one that probably didn't mean what he said it did. I saw the poor lady was completely shook from the way of the twitching of her eyelid. I wanted to tell him to cram it, dude, but I just looked back at the man who started the feud. The lady left to get a Bloody Mary. I couldn't blame her for leaving hostile territory. Staying to argue would win you no glory. I wanted to know the smoking guy's mysterious story. And as he puffed the cigar, he said, "Come here, kid." Despite reservation in the seat next to him, I slid. I sure wasn't wrong to consider him suspicious, as he immediately opened his mouth and said, "I'm a killer." But don't worry too much about it. It wasn't that malicious. I was convicted and told such a thriller that they let me go because of insanity. Or maybe they felt a strange and rare twinge of Christianity. I got up to go, but he grabbed my arm and convinced me to sit and enjoy his society. I might admit, I was taken in a little by his charm. Or maybe I was just having a bout of anxiety. "Who'd you kill?" I finally decided to say. "I've got to start at the beginning," he said, as he emptied the ashtray. "When I was a young man," he started plainly, "I was wealthy and could have what I wanted, and no man can deal with this sanely. And by one filling, I was completely haunted. Oh boy, you're young. I think you completely understand. And my life wasn't going exactly like I planned. I needed not one, but like 3 or 4. I became such a rage that I tried otherwise, but anything else became such a chore, and I couldn't relax until I'd had my prize. Don't you know that feeling of paralyzation when the religious man says you're facing damnation? I knew I had to get married and find a girl that I could call my very own, one that for me was specifically designed, and one that no one else could have ever known, because I knew out of the 10 I'd most likely covet, and every time I saw the same sex, I'd say shove it. But one day I did see her, and heard her sing, like a siren, an angel, or a devil from hell. I knew she'd make my ears permanently ring, and that she would reduce me to one brain cell. Things were fine until we married, and that night, at which time we should have both taken flight. She had so many opinions and such ambitions that I had to sit her down and explain the world, and that everything came with the laundry list of conditions. But she just sat there with her hair all curled. I felt my brain go completely numb as I watched her mouth smack that gum. I started to design scenarios in my head in which I could get away from her grasp, and this is when I started to imagine her dead, in a tragic way like Cleopatra and the Asp. But despite all these clouds flying over me, she told me something that would keep me rooted like a tree. "Let me be honest with you, kid, about what is life. It is a pollution and disease spread over the earth, and to contribute to what is already in strife, well, I couldn't see any of the worth. But she told me that my version was now in miniature. All I could say is, are you completely sure?" That is when the jealous rage only increased. After all, doctors had started to swarm my place. "Take off your clothes," said the first to the least, and they all took a lot of interest in the case. This is all normal, everyone always claimed, so I guess no one really should be blamed. Things only got worse after the birth, as everyone got to see I was second place, the object of ridicule. I looked at the thing in all its mirth, and I couldn't help but feel like a fool. All of my independence had been robbed, as it just sobbed and sobbed. A little clump of flesh with no ability, its eyes shone up at me like it could demand all of my time and all of my availability. I know this whole arrangement had to disband. Probably worst of all, I'd been demoted, and that little thing just cried and gloated. Just when I thought it was at its worst, in came that cocky and attractive singer. I saw the way they smiled as they rehearsed. I sure couldn't stand the way he'd linger. And night I dreamed they were all together, perhaps all strapped up in leather. So one day I heard him crowing like a lark. I grabbed him by the collar and swung him, and I knew he would leave a mark when he landed directly on the trim. I said, "Get out of here forever and leave town." And she came in while he was stinging from the beatdown. I got so angry that I picked up a rock, a weight that we used to keep on paper, and slammed it up against her with such a knock that her eyes went up like vapor. "You've really killed me," her body whined, and I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. The man stopped and relit a cigar, and I wanted to know why he told me this, as I was embarrassed for everyone in the train car, and his eyes just shone in a state of bliss, He said no one should be forced to be born in brutality, but I guess that's just family morality. A man walked slowly up the steps of the courthouse. He had jury duty and felt he was too rich for it. He thought he shouldn't be considered such a louse. Maybe I can think of an excuse or maybe just quit. Claim the courts are corrupt and take a plane out of here where it does nothing except rain. In these cases, one hopes it all gets withdrawn and that the criminal just confesses to their sin, or that the district attorney is found to be gone and tried to trick everyone by substituting his twin. But today the government was much too aggravated, and the accused did not feel that punishment was fated. See, she'd been accused of not only a form of perjury, but with the slightly more serious crime of murder, all in order to raise enough money for surgery, as she was tired of being for men who hurt her, working late at night until the lights came on, making money for some guy named Juan. The state accused her of using poison to kill, even though there aren't many more uses for something so designed to fit the bill. Of course, that wasn't all the state accuses, and so a rich young man listened to all the facts and watched as all the lawyers held up artifacts. These are working girls' clothes, as you can see. There's no denying what she did and who she is. From the room did the defendant flee, leaving, unfortunately, the corpse that was his. You can do one thing and one thing only: convict and put her in a place that is lonely. But our hero studied the expression on her face and knew that this couldn't be all there was. He talked to his fellow members and asked them for grace. One wanted to go home, just 'cause, while another hated all women that made money. Another had shown up sick, with his nose all runny. A rich young man suddenly realized he knew her well. In fact, he was probably someone she hated, and in a manner, of course, had put her in jail. Their link was that they had previously procreated, because our hero had been the defendant's first, and if you heard the whole story, you'd think he's the worst. Suffice it to say, our protagonist left with the gift of a little more and a little less than pure cash. So the young woman found it necessary to take off swift to somewhere they wouldn't care if she had a stash, and when she'd gotten rid of that thing, she started applying her trade with a bang. All these rushing memories filled our hero with uneasiness, so he started thinking of what he could do to make it right. The proceedings went on with such a bleakness that he knew he could be her knight. The others were just ready to get out, including the one that was suffering from a severe attack of gout. He had the verdict in hand to present, confident he had done exactly what he needed. When he looked down, he noticed he had misspelled innocent. When the judge read it, he realized his will had been superseded, so the little working girl was sentenced to 20 long ones. But the workhouses should be carrying tons. There's only one way to fix this mess, thought the rich man to himself in a lonely moment. I have to use all the means I possess. He'd track her down and make the announcement. He'd tie her with him so they could be two. He'd stick beside her and never bid her adieu. In the workhouse, she learned how to smoke and drink wine and vodka made by unclean means, and how to numb herself as soon as she was woke, and to live like she had in her teens, surrendering herself to a completely different instinct. When she walked by the handsome guards, they all winked. When the rich man saw her, he knew it was time to go up, and he asked for forgiveness for what he'd done. Of course, I knew we should never have broken up. Please let me marry you, and as a token, take this crown. No thanks, she said with real congeniality, but I guess that's just family morality. The old man said there's a lot of ways to be unhappy. People tend to invent new ways every week. They'll take all kinds of stuff that make them feel crappy, because their outlook has become way too bleak. If I'm being honest, I want to escape this life, one in which corruption and mistakes are rife. What would I like to do, you might want to know? I'd like to go out and enjoy all that nature has to offer beyond digging with a hoe. I know there are ideas out for the agitator, but I feel so trapped and ensnared here. And who is the real, pulling the strings puppeteer? His wife and kids disagreed with him on everything, and they didn't like when he wouldn't eat or conform. He found he could no longer hold off until spring, when outside it would at least be lukewarm. His doctor was telling him about a new illness, and didn't want to become his accomplice. So the old man gathered his books, and went outside. He left a little letter for his wife and kids. When they found it, they all loudly decried the way he sold all his goods and forbids them from stealing it back from the peasants, who need them for the future of their adolescence. Into the cold the man found the train, and he was heading out to another nation, a place with an entirely unique terrain, so he could complete his renunciation of everything he despised and found unwise. But his life, he felt it, denies. The wind was blowing and the snow was falling. By the time he made it to the station, his breath paused. He started to regret all the time he'd been stalling. Or maybe it was something years of smoking caused. He stood in line and had to sit on the bench. He realized he had a thirst. He had to quench. When he coughed, he knew it was over. But he demanded that his wife not be allowed to see him one last time, and moreover, that someone do something about this crowd. Everyone mourned at this old man's mortality, but I guess that's just family morality.